As Los Angeles burns, a household is divided. A young mother fighting to protect her family, a young father driven to the breaking point, both weathering the storm of a volatile moment in the city's history. This is 9/2. Today, we're joined by writer-director David Gallardo.
Hello.
Actor Sabi Portlock.
Hello.
I'm Christopher Ryan Laughter.
And I'm Kevin Rosenquan. Will be your co-host today for today's episode of the Assorted Kinds podcast.
So, David, why don't you start us off by giving us a introduction to the film?
It is a family drama where during the second day of the riots, a mother and father have this sort of argument amongst themselves in front of their only kid, where the father feels responsible and wants to go out and do something about what's happening. He wants to go out and riot. He feels very connected to the events that have happened, and he feels that he can't just stand by idly as like things are happening. So he feels like a responsibility as a father and as a man to go and do what's right. He feels right, and his wife, played by Sabi, is urging him to stay home because it being the second day, it almost feels post-apocalyptic, and nobody knows where it's going to end, when it's going to end, and it just seems like it keeps growing and growing. So she feels, the more I keep my family together, then at least she knows that they'll be protected, regardless of what's happening. She herself understands them. But so anyway, that whole thing takes place in front of their kid, who is sort of like off doing in his own little world, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the conflict there of the entire story.
Pretty tense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So a reminder to us all how hard it is to craft a log line and how difficult it is to remember your log line after you've crafted it. So your log line, just for fun, is: as Los Angeles burns, a household is divided. A young mother fighting to protect her family, a young father driven to the breaking point, both weathering the storm of a volatile moment in a city's history, which is a great log line.
Thank you.
It's very good. It says a lot. David, where did this film come from? Like, what brought this into existence?
It actually comes from a very vivid memory I had as a kid growing up in mid-city LA. I grew up literally right off of Pico and La Brea, which was sort of like sort of the middle of everything that had been, like the middle of the chaos, because it started in South LA and it kind of moved north all the way to Hollywood. And sort of mid-city was sort of like the very center of it all, because that was the middle of that area. And I grew up over on that area, and I remember seeing things on the news for those days and seeing that there was like chaos happening. But I, in my very young 6-year-old mind, had no idea how dire. It just looked like, oh, that's terrible things happening. There's helicopters around, and how cool the news van is outside my house, or and so I remember like going out to my front yard to play like I always did, and like looking up in the sky and seeing smoke and seeing ash sort of fall and thinking like, oh wow, that's kind of crazy.
So you were like aware of the proximity.
I was aware of the proximity, but like I said, like because I didn't see, here's the thing, I actually spoke to my parents about this recently, and I asked them like, what did you guys even think, because I never really had that conversation, and they're like, we didn't think anything was going to be bad because we were all together. And this is a conversation I had literally after I had done the film and had written it and stuff like that.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me like that was part of the inspiration.
No, like this was even before I even put it out. So like they hadn't even seen it, and they were like, I thought we were going to be fine. And my dad worked on the West Side, and worked at a bank. And in the West Side, like he worked in Pacific Palisades at the time, and nothing was affecting that area. It was very like, it was like a whole, like I said, in the line that I wrote, it's like a whole other planet, because there was nothing happening. And I never felt like my dad was angry or in danger or anything like that. And like asking them now, they're like, no, I thought we would be fine. So back to the main inspiration. So I remember that moment vividly, is like going outside and seeing smoke. And I always thought like, that's such a cinematic moment. And I had that moment ingrained in my memory for the longest time. And I always wondered like, well, how do I lead up to that? How do I and I never found the right project to kind of bring that in. And I had music video ideas and like art ideas. I never knew exactly, but I always knew this is a very cinematic moment. And last year, I was working as a producer on a contract job for this company that actually gave me, I was pretty much driving from Koreatown all the way to Santa Monica every morning, and it was like an hour drive back and forth, and that pretty much allowed me time to just think. You know what I mean?
That'll do it.
Yeah,
Finally, something good for that
LA
traffic does
traffic.
for you.
Yes, thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it kind of coincided with me. That job coincided with me kind of joining Assorted Kinds, which kind of got the engine started on my head on like, I should write something. And so like now I had parameters where I can like, there was like 2 people talking, 1 location, and I was like, oh, I can start coming up with this. And so pretty much I think it took me like probably a month to really kind of, in those back and forth, just to really flesh out the story and why, flesh out that moment. Like, where does that moment come from? And the idea is having like, having been in long-term relationships in my life, I know those moments of like having arguments with your partner and sort of like not trying to let other people know that you're having an argument and saying certain things that only both of you know, kind of thing. So I kind of wanted to kind of inject some of my own personal history in there. And I remember once I kind of figured out the beats of the story, I don't remember if I had written it and called Sabi, or like I was thinking about writing it, called her, and then it kind of grew out of that. I don't remember exactly which one came first. And I remember the day that I presented it, which was I think it was April 29th or April 30th of last year. I wrote it like I had some downtime in my editing job that I was doing, and in like 4 or 5 hours kind of banged out the first draft of the script and presented it that night, which ironically I was like, oh wow, it's April 30th, just like, I kind of wanted to like like that date that I put on there. And that's kind of where it came from. And I think I had a conversation with Sabi before I presented it, just to let her know like, hey, I wrote this with you in mind. Because me and her actually had conversations months before on like doing a narrative of something. We didn't know what it was going to be. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to put you in this. I wrote this with seeing her in my head, and yeah, that's kind of where the idea originated from. It was like a bunch of different things, my own inspiration, having seen the LA 92 documentary that felt very raw, very like, topical, because it was like all these documentaries were coming out about the time, and I was like, oh, I want to inject my own sort of, output, during this time.
It's really interesting that you had the kind of the end first and working your way up to that. I can't tell you how many ideas I've had for the opening, and then the third act you just give up because it's just like it's too insurmountable, and it's just interesting to do it backwards and have where you want to end to. Did you? I don't know if you were even thinking about this at the time, but do you think it was easier because of that, because you had the end worked up to it, or do you think it's just as complicated to figure out, just in the opposite
it was
direction?
just as complicated.
Right.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, it happens a lot to me. Like, ever since I've been a filmmaker, since I was like 18, I've always had that, I have this great idea, but I never know where it's going to go and how to end it, because it's like you have this great concept, but you're like,
the world.
It looks great, but it's like, it just... completely like falls apart.
What's the conflict and where are we headed?
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like it actually was easier to put it together that time around, because I had those parameters with Assorted Kinds. And the thing is, like, I've written scripts before, like my own scripts that have never gone anywhere. But for some reason, having other people looking like, I want to see what you can come up with these parameters of like having 2 people in one location. I was like, oh, okay, I have these rules that I can work in. I know how to create that. It was just, it helped me a lot to have that. So here's the thing. I suffer from this thing where like, and I'm sure every artist does, is that you have these
dementia.
Yep.
Oh no. Sorry. Different department.
Depression and anxiety.
No,
this the thing where like you have these big ideas, like Chris just said, world building, where you want to be like, I have this giant idea and I want this to be like this, and it's just like you got to sort of almost limit it a little bit and come down to reality so you can execute something, because the ideas are great. It's always great to have these great ideas, but it's just like, how can we make it realistic and doable?
Narrow the net.
And I also think it's interesting that you're talking about all these different pieces kind of coming together. I feel like maybe more so nowadays, where you're looking at movies that are just like, what comic book is it based on, or like, it's very easy to kind of like draw the line of where it, how it came about. But I feel like I don't want to say back in the day, because it makes me sound really old. But I feel like
You're
Snow and,
vintage.
like,
when there
Miles
weren't
Davis
as
or
many
what?
franchise stuff, I feel like there were more stories like that where people just have ideas floating around, and then they meet the right actress, they meet the right producer, they meet the right scenario, and then it all just very quickly all solidifies from this kind of like nebulous, like I don't really know, to just like we got it and let's shoot it.
I've been watching a lot of the Criterion channel lately. By the way, everybody should subscribe to that channel. It's amazing.
Criterion.
In there.
Criterion.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's it has it reminds me, like, it lets me see films from obviously like from the 40s to the 60s, and one of the most interesting things is that, like, you definitely. Actually, I'll give you my login.
Yes.
It's already paid for the year, so I'm just like sharing my login.
Okay.
Hook me up, dude. I'll get down too. How many logins can you give away?
I have no idea.
We'll find out.
But it's one of those things where you see films that Cassavetes did or whatever, like, that are just slices of life and moments that you're like, oh, this is just this self-contained story that only exists this way. I'm trying to remember what movie I just saw on the Criterion channel that made me go, like, nobody makes movies that are just these standalone stories that have no connection to anything. Kind of like what you said. There's no.
It's tough to sell. I suppose. Or whatever. But I mean, Chris just showed at the beginning. Like you can, as long as you can create your log line, you can create a log line of anything, and you can make it, appealing or understandable to people. It doesn't have to be based on a comic book.
Your character. Who we're talking about? We're telling a story with. Your what do they want, and what's keeping them from getting it?
But I like the little like extra spice that you have in it. So there's this different types of spice. One of them's like the ending or whatever, and the effects there, and the other one is just having the sun there. It's so easy to just have this scene between two people and have it be an argument, and that could you could have just shot it like that.
Absolutely.
But having that X factor of the sun in there is really what made this short special. I think
It came from one of those things where, like, we've seen a couple argue all the time on, in media and film and stuff like that. What can I, like you said, what can I add in there that will just like elevate that argument, or just kind of like raise those stakes? It's like, what are they fighting for, essentially? They could be fighting about it, but it's like, well, what is there that really should that would support her argument? You know what I mean?
You brought up the fact that your father was saying we're going to be all right, or thought we were going to be all right. When you said that, when he said that, was he specifically saying like we as in the family, this little our family?
Yeah, it's four of us. It's me, my parents, and my sister. So it's four of us, not three.
Yeah.
And that's what they meant. It was the four of us were going to be fine. And like, and it's true. Like, it made me realize, like, oh, that's why I didn't feel any kind of worry or panic. It just felt like, because what ended up happening days later, maybe like a day or two after it, I think it might have been like fallen on like a Thursday. So like a Saturday, everything sort of started dying down. And I remember us driving around in that neighborhood and seeing like the supermarket was burnt down, and like that shopping center was burned down, and my parents took photos and stuff like that, and people were trying to clean up. I think it wasn't until then that we saw the real, like, just how dire it was, and how like the real sort of like toll.
Because you were kind of insulated.
Yeah,
from
I was at I was at home. I think I was in school or something. I was like was I in kindergarten? Might have been kindergarten. I was in school, and like I didn't feel. And kindergarten was like literally maybe like a couple blocks away. It wasn't even that far, so I didn't really see the things happening. Thank God.
That's the interesting thing about LA is that like it's spread out enough that you really can.
Yeah.
Every city, every piece is its own world.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll get into it later when we talk about other people's reactions about it, because I did get some feedback from people. But some of the stories that people have told me about their experiences were like, I was like, oh, I never had that. So
when your father was saying that we'll be okay, was he already seeing the world and the chaos around that? Just you guys? Was he seeing the chaos outside of just your little pocket?
I think so. I mean, because like I said, he worked in Palisades, so he literally had to drive through it. I mean, he would take the 10 every day. You know what I mean, to work and come back, because he would get off of let me see, he would take the 10 and we'd get off on Western, I think, and so that was like in the middle of all
dead
that.
center.
That was dead center.
Yeah.
So like, I haven't really dug into it, but he felt like we'd be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he says now.
Yeah, right.
I feel like I
It's
need
like affirmation.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like I gotta dig.
He's willing to being fine into existence.
Yes.
Yeah. And I feel like I need to like sort of like really ask him like, did you really think you'd be fine? You know what I mean? I guess. But then at the same time, he was also really young. He was like my age.
Yeah.
Now, he was like 32, I think.
Yeah.
I'm 33 now, but he was 32 then, which is when I wrote the script last year.
Yeah.
And so like that was another aspect of why I wanted to write it is like, what would I be thinking?
Right.
If I was 30, the person I am now, if I was transported back then, how would I be thinking?
Right.
So I gave my voice to Lou, the actor Lou, on like, it was like, that's what I would be thinking. I feel like I want to go do something. I don't feel like I should stand by, which is different than the way my dad thinks. My dad feels like, oh, we'll be fine. And I'm more like, no, I can't stand. You got to do something about this, So,
Well, so Sabi, and were you in Los Angeles at the time of the riots, or?
Yeah, I was born and raised here, and my parents my dad and his family too. But some of the reactions that I got were from my family members who were in their 20s or something during this time, and my aunt and stuff. She's living her best life, and then all this is happening, and she saw the film and she sent me a text and she said, I just got goosebumps. She's like, this was such a scary time and I feel like I just was taken back by watching this. And I was like, wow, I have no idea. Because obviously I was too young, you know what I mean? But I took a lot of inspiration from the film. I mean, to play that character from my mother. She is not from this country, but she was in this country during that time. And it was scary for her, just like everything else was to everyone else. But my mom, in my childhood, I felt like there was a lot of like, we're going to be all right. We're going to be all right. And I feel like she would have said that, like the actual line that my character said, I feel like she would have said that. So I was literally channeling. Thank you. Channeling my own mother in the character. And so
I think it comes from, because your mother's Salvadorian.
Yeah.
My father's Salvadorian as well. And I think it comes from because they came. What year did your mother come to the U.S.?
I don't know, but it was during
early
the Civil War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The stuff that they escaped in El Salvador was definitely much worse than the stuff we got here in the riots. It was like they were recruiting kids as young as like 10 years old into the military, and so like whole towns would get like raided and like
let's talk about
killed.
Perspective.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating to see how they felt through our news, how we're reacting to it. Like, hey guys, why don't you just chill out?
So I think that's where it probably comes from. It's just that like what we escaped was much worse.
Right, as long as we're together.
Yeah, exactly. And we're in this country, we're fine.
Yeah, that says a lot. There's like, when you talk about the context of like what you've seen, how dramatic a moment is, are you going to blow it out of proportion, or are you going to just like, like roll with the punches? But like if what you're coming from is so much more blown up. Then like this thing, you're like, we'll be all right.
This is just lay low and stay together.
Right. Yeah.
Damn.
Nobody's going into churches and
Let's not get crazy here. We're not gonna fight in this fight.
Exactly.
It doesn't make it any less serious or dire for the people in that situation.
Absolutely.
Which is what was portrayed in the scene.
Absolutely.
I think.
You're right.
And that's why I think that it's very universal as well, just as far as people being afraid for their families.
Exactly.
That's a very like universal thing that a lot of people can relate to.
That was something else that I tried to tap into, because the world right now is in a chaotic state. If we really look at what's going on, like sometimes I have to block it out because it's like, can only take so much.
Yeah.
But I was trying to imagine being a young mother. I'd be terrified. I mean, I have talks with my friends, like, I'm not having children until the world gets better. Like, it's like, you know what I mean? So
a lot of people have that conversation.
Yeah. And so it's like, if the world is literally outside of your house, there is chaos and fires and burning down, and all of it stemmed from the racial injustice that had been like perpetuated and shown in the media of like, well, we don't really care. And we're seeing people beat to death and shot, and oh well. And that's like a constant thing that's still present now. It's still a tension in the country now. Yeah. And so that was another reason why I felt connected to it. It was like, well, this is like still happening. So yeah, I can do this. I know exactly where to pull from.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a screenwriter friend, an actor friend also, who I originally had actually asked to be in this, but he had some scheduling conflicts. But he did give me notes on the script. And one of the things that actually, I think actually kind of almost blew my mind a little bit was like, if you took this story, would it work in 2019, 2018? And I was like,
ding, ding,
yeah.
ding.
I was like, yeah. I was like, all right. So like, if you feel the story can work, then it can work then.
Yeah.
And it kind of let me kind of go into the dialogue and like, you know, some of the beats and just kind of like, okay, this could work here. Like, you know, the setting can change, but the story will still be pretty, you know, sound.
Relevant, potent.
Yeah.
And Kevin, what was your connection to the story in that time?
I think I had just moved to an upper classy type town. And
Upper classy, huh?
Yeah, I guess.
Gated?
No, but it had like a lot of private schools. They were in a movie in a private school, and I was very specifically like, I don't want to go to a private school. I want to go to a public school. Hang out with private school kids.
Rebel.
I want to be like I want to meet like real people.
Right.
And so, but that being said, we were very very insulated. It seemed very far away. I remember my grandparents though live like right smack in the middle of downtown, right next door to where the Broad is now. And my grandfather was a bus driver. He drove the Dash, and so I used to go downtown and visit them, and we'd get on his bus, and he would just drive us out to wherever. So
That's
I remember
cool.
like wondering if like they were okay, and then also hearing that they were fine. But it was mainly just kind of like here are areas you're no longer allowed to go to. I even remember. It's funny. I keep thinking of watching Bowling for Columbine. I even remember that movie, Bowling for Columbine. There's a specific scene where he like basically like goes like to South Central onto some like famous street in the middle of South Central. Just kind of like, well, it looks okay out here. I'm not getting shot. I don't feel threatened. So like maybe because I feel like once those riots happened, that was like a permanent thing. It was just kind of like these are areas where there is just like constant riot will be happening forever, and you're just not allowed to go here anymore. And it was like, oh, that's not the case at all. But it was such a scare at the time that like people were just like labeling whole areas of just like this is if you are a white person, this is an off limits area to you, especially like as a young child or whatever. It's like you're not allowed to go in these areas. So and I think I saw Bowling for Columbine in college at USC, which is like right in the middle of all of that stuff, and just kind of like putting that all into perspective. So but yeah, I was still felt far removed, even though I was right next to it.
I was a kid in Houston, Texas, and it didn't even, it just felt like something on the TV.
Yeah.
Right? They're just like, oh,
but they reported it. They reported about it and everything. Like,
yeah.
did you guys have like special
it was like a
reports or anything
nationwide
like that?
Yeah, but I was like, I was the kid watching the TV, watching cartoons, right? Not really paying attention. I think I saw more about it after the fact than I saw during it. And my parents never talked to me about it. Right. It was just like, okay, that's happening. And I have these like very vague memories of it. And I think I've seen more of it in pop culture since than I have when it actually was happening.
Is there anything analogous though from that, from your neck of the woods that would be similar in the history of?
No, I mean, we just had stories of like getting shot for shoes or like getting beat up because of whatever. And like, we didn't really have massive community terror. We just had, it was like small suburbs of, some big city. It's like the outskirts of a big city. And like, people were afraid of anything.
So were you just like, I'm not going to LA, I'll tell you that much.
Well, yeah.
You know what I think? I think you even see it in media and pop culture, in movies and TV shows that were produced after the riots. It turned into like, they made LA look like this sort of lawless post-apocalyptic place. Like if you look
a lot
at
of movies leaned into that.
Like if you look at, I remember very vividly Demolition Man and how they
favorite.
show LA in like
Favorite.
97 or whatever.
Yeah,
even though the movie came out in 94.
Hollywood signs like burning.
Yeah, it's like it's this lawless apocalyptic place, and I was like, no.
Predator 2 was
Predator
like that
2,
too,
the same thing.
where they're just everything was lawless and it was also like 100 degrees all the time, which is kind of like now.
Yeah.
So they got that right apparently.
Yeah. So much everything looked orange.
Yeah.
No, I know.
Just like it does.
But
now.
it's kind of interesting, like these movies that were produced out here, even though being out here, it shows you that even Hollywood and people that lived on the West Side, who were the executives and the directors and the producers who did this, they were even that far removed that they were like, oh yeah, that area is dead. You can't go there. Like even that shows you that even being in the same city, people were that disconnected from it. And that's why like I feel like it was very relevant for me to put in. It's like these people feel like it's another planet because it's like they can't relate. You know, they're not even from here.
Right.
And I feel like it affected a lot of people who were born and raised here. You know.
Yeah.
Before we actually jump into the production, did you guys talk about actually how you met? I know you sort of mentioned that you know each other.
Do you remember meeting me?
But how'd you
Do you remember? I want to know if you actually remember.
This is a test.
I know, right?
I can see what's happening right
Testing
now.
the loyalty.
Actually, I do. Was it on the set of Cali Love, the music video?
No, it was not.
Oh.
See,
earlier? Busted.
Got it wrong.
So I, in my journey as a filmmaker, one of the things I was doing a lot from 2010 all the way to about 2013, I was doing a lot of BTS, and going on, music video shoots and like photo shoots in order to build a relationship with labels in order so they can give me music videos because figured that was a way in.
Yeah, and to pay the rent.
And to pay the rent, pay my bills. It was great. And one of the first BTS gigs I got was shooting BTS for a photo shoot for this new upcoming artist named Sabi. And it was being shot at the Pink Motel in the Valley.
hell yeah.
Oh my
And
God.
it was literally her first photo shoot as a solo artist.
It was.
Yeah.
You're right.
Um,
On Warner
Were
Brothers.
you in like a group before?
Yes.
Hey.
We were called the Bangs. And
Yes,
then
that's right.
got
I
to-
remember that. I learned that way after the fact that we knew
Okay.
each other. I was like, oh yeah.
Oh, you knew?
Yeah. Okay. So for those that don't know, there was a moment in time in Los Angeles where
Yeah.
there was this movement called the Jerkin movement. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember this one big song, "You're a Jerk," and it
You're a
was this,
jerk. I know.
Yeah, you're a jerk. So it was almost like 10 years ago, a little bit over 10 years ago, and it was this huge movement where it kind of started out of Hamilton High School, and surprisingly, this is my connection to that. By the way, the kid who started producing a lot of Jerkin music went to Hamilton High School, but the reason he went to Hamilton High School is because he used to go to my high school, Daniel Murphy High School, that actually was getting closed down in 2008. It closed down in 2008. So all those kids that hadn't graduated had to go to different schools in the area. So one of this kid transferred to Hamilton High School, which which he met some of the people who kind of started that movement, and he sort of was producing. I forget the name of his production name, but if it wasn't for my high school closing down, the Jerkin movement wouldn't have been a thing.
Wow.
It's kind of
a sacrifice worth making, I guess.
It's a weird little backstory, but yeah,
LA culture history.
Yeah, LA
Right?
culture. But
Thank you for
Sabi
that.
was in a group called
The Bangs.
Okay.
Yeah.
I forget what was the song that you
right.
guys had.
Boys with tattoos.
Yes.
It was so ratchet.
Positive or
It
negative?
was a dope
It
ass
was
song.
like,
It was a really cool
I
song.
only date boys with tattoos.
Yes, it was an
Like-
amazing song, by the way. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Love it.
So then I went to
Yeah.
got a solo deal in pop division
Yeah.
with Warner Brothers, and that's where we met.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
I
So
thought it was Cali Love, which was like 3 videos later.
Yeah, it was like a few videos later, where I was by the same the same commissioner hit me. I was like, hey, I know you've shot behind the scenes for her too. I was like, you want to go and do this for a behind the scenes video for Cali Love Sabi? I was like, oh yeah, for sure, I'll go. And we kind of reconnected.
Well, that's when we really had conversation.
We had a real
If we had
conversation.
conversation back then, it was like
Yeah.
I was so new and
Yeah,
green,
for
and
sure.
I was like, "What is going
For
on?"
sure, yeah.
I'm just trying to show up and do
yeah,
right.
yeah. And we had a conversation then, and it was like, yeah, if we really bonded on the fact that we both had Salvadorian parents,
Hey.
so it was like very, but we kept in contact, like as many relationships now, it's like through social media. And I think like that was kind of how we kind of, started building our relationship and stuff like that. And then was it 2016? 2016. Might have been like 3 years later, we started talking more about like actually kind of working together.
Oh yeah, it was 2016.
It was
That was
2016.
the year my grandma passed. We shot a video.
We shot a music video,
Yes.
finally, after
Yes.
years.
Yes. Like independently. I was
independently.
independent now, and
Yeah.
I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of, we need to talk. But go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we shot a music video. It was great. It was fun. I feel like we were both in sort of like in new paths from when we had last seen each
Right.
other. Like, she had gone independent. I kind of saw that the music video route as an artist was a little, I was sort of disappointed in it because I realized like how much legwork you had to do yourself, because you felt like, you were kind of on your own. And so like I really took charge of my sort of like indie-ness and sort of kind of realized like, no, we got to do this on my own and I can do this, and we'd shot a great video, kind of, great concept. And obviously it turned out amazing. And we've obviously kept in touch and like, we should do some more stuff, and I know Sabi was you were doing some acting, so I was like, we'll definitely have to do something narrative, because that's where I felt like I would lead to. And then, I mean, the conversation sort of kind of, hey, we should work. And it's always
over
one of those
years.
Over years, yeah.
That's the funny thing is like if people think this stuff just kind of like magically
Right.
happens,
Yeah, no.
like that,
No
but,
way.
Yeah.
like you gotta just have you gotta have the fattest back pockets because you just stick everything in your
Yeah.
back pocket and then one
Yeah.
day you pull it
You're
out.
stashing.
and
You're
you
like,
make it
you're like a
happen.
squirrel with nuts.
I mean, it's the name of the game here in this town too.
That's
It's
true.
just like, you build relationships over the years, and you might work together years
Right.
later. You might work together right away,
Right.
and you just kind of have to keep those, bridges open.
Yeah, and get started as early as you can too,
Yeah.
because you can't like if you move, especially if you're like
Yeah.
moving to LA and you're like,
Yeah.
I want to get started 6 months in. It's
Yeah.
no,
Dude, it
no.
takes
It
so
takes a
long to
while.
build up your
Yeah.
It's hard.
your database
Yeah.
of like possibilities.
Yeah.
I came here at 26 years old,
Yeah,
and then I'm like pushing 40, and I'm like, I feel like I'm just getting started,
yeah.
like with what I came here to do.
Wait, you
Right.
came at 26?
Yeah.
You were 26 when I met
with
you.
with
Wow.
Matt and
Y'all came
you guys
in-
are still
yeah.
rocking it now,
Yeah.
making
I
shorts.
mean, Matt's he's like he's a little bit younger than me, but we got here at the same time, and then kind of have built a relationship off like, oh, you're new to LA, like I'm new to LA too. Let's go.
Mhm.
We work on that Ron Jeremy music video with
Oh
Dan
my
Adobe,
God.
and here we are making and doing Assorted Kinds. Well, okay, so one thing that just popped in my head was like, most of your career has been like this DIY kind of like just push the boulder down the street yourself,
Yeah,
for the most part.
right.
And so now this is a kind of pivot into narrative where you can do that,
Yeah,
but you're going to be a lot better off if you're not doing that.
yeah.
And so how has the transition felt, and how has it like played with your skill set?
Well, even before I did Assorted Kinds, like the conversations I had with her, even months before I joined the group, that's when we really started having these conversations about doing something narrative together. I think one of the ideas that me and Sabi threw around was like a sort of like a dance. It was something inspired by like Black Swan.
Around the music I was
Ooh.
working on.
yeah, around the
we were
music
trying
you
to
were-
do like a film
Yeah.
video.
Sick.
Yeah, and I wanted to do something kind of that integrated that, and it was just like, sort of like a dancer sort of kind of fighting with herself or her evil self kind of thing. And we had been talking about it. We were trying to figure out how to do it, and I was like, in my head, I was like, I'm just gonna figure it out and do it myself. You know
which
what
makes
I mean?
sense with your like fashion film background.
Yeah. A lot of my stuff is done that way to make it look like other people, like more people worked on it.
Right.
And
Make it look bigger than it actually is.
right. I mean, it's
magic.
Yeah, I do my best.
Yeah.
But
do a great job.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, that's something we had been talking about because, I know that's why we started the conversation. I edited your acting reel.
Oh, that's
Oh,
right.
damn.
Yeah, that's where the conversation had sort of started. Like, I edited her acting reel, and I was looking at some of her acting. I was like, I want to add to this,
Right.
But then I met up with you. We did I joined Assorted Kinds, and immediately I was like, I'm gonna. This is it. It was like it almost felt like I know I can do this myself.
Right.
Once I joined, I was like, oh, okay, here's the platform.
Oh, I'm not alone.
Yeah, I'm not
Thanks,
alone.
universe.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's what it felt
Yeah.
like.
Yep.
And I remember like immediately, like when I was working on the script and developing, like I called Sabi and like, I mean, what did you think when I called you about it and told you about it? Like, and I remember we had a long conversation. I was like at work.
This
and
was
I,
after you sent the script, right?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Oh no, you know what? It was before. I was doing it that week. I was just like, or the week before or something like that.
But you were with Assorted Kinds?
I was already with Assorted Kinds, but I was like, I'm submitting the script. Yeah, it might have been that day.
Oh, yes.
I was like, I'm submitting it
yes.
today.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember.
Did it get chosen on the first read?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, because it was like we were like, oh damn, something like that. We all want to like do something like that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. So how did you feel when
I
we
was
had that conversation?
excited. Yeah, because I know personally it was something that you had been trying to figure out as a way to forge your own storytelling from your own creative perspective and not from someone else's to get a check. And as a creative, I totally understand that. And I was like, right on, David. Like, you know, like if you found a family that's going to help support the vision and create it, it's like even better. So I was really excited. Yeah.
I mean, hearing her excitement when I was like telling her about it, I was like, okay, perfect. I got my actress. I know I got somebody locked in, you know?
Oh, yeah. That's dope. That's cool. That's just like cool to hear that from over here as like, I'm making Assorted Kinds.
Right, yeah. It's like, get to see the fruit you're bearing.
Yeah.
That's dope.
Well, that was the thing with, you know, me for a while. Like I, while I was, you know, in my journey, there was always this thing where like, anytime I would meet actors out in public, like at events or like at certain sort of like little like, you know, just events and stuff like that. I never connected with them because it always felt like, hey, I'm an actor. And I was like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't, you know, you just want to meet me because I'm this.
Yeah, it feels weird.
Yeah, but then, you know, obviously I realized I was like, well, I need to build a relationship with actors because like they're the ones that, you know, tell your story. And obviously I grew out of that and just sort of like, but it sort of, I almost feel like I ease my way into learning how to build a relationship with actors by sort of my friendship with Sabi and like the work we had done together. And so like, you know, a lot of
It's organic.
it was very organic.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things where like, you know, I think about like directors that have relationships with their actors and like, you know, you think of Scorsese and you think of Nolan who has like these actors that they're constantly using based on their relationship and personal relationship they have with them.
Right, and you get why.
Yeah.
Happens.
Yeah.
I mean, because I will go ahead.
No,
I was going to say, like,
yeah.
from an actress point of view, the two projects that I've done, one a full feature film and then this short, and then I've done like another short, but they were all relationships. I really appreciate that. I am not the type of person to be like, hi,
Yeah.
we should work with me.
Yeah.
This is why I can do this and that. I'm not, it's not my personality. It never has been. I don't think it ever will be.
No.
And no shade against it.
No, for sure.
It's just, I am not that.
But you know
So,
exactly what I'm talking about.
I know exactly.
Yeah.
And it becomes very serious and competitive
Yeah.
and like, just a very different mode.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in that mode.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate the organic. I hope all of my acting projects always come from organic sources.
Yeah. That's why I love that show Barry. You've seen the show Barry?
No.
On
Not
it?
yet.
I mean, it's, you know, a hitman who wants to be an actor, but he joins an acting class.
Yeah.
And all the actors in that class are very like, I'm an actor. They're very like in their own world and stuff like that. So I was like, oh yeah, that happens.
I enjoy poking at actors who are like that and trying to break through that shell that
Oh, yeah.
they have up. It's like this character they're wearing, and it's like, I see you in your character,
Yeah,
and
no,
I want
for
to
sure.
know what's behind it
Yeah.
if there is anything. And so I'll give it a moment where I'm like, okay, is this person gonna let me in? Like, actually be them? Because if they will, I'll give it a chance. But if not, I'm out. See you later.
Yeah.
And to be fair, that is the nature of the game. Like when you're going out there to do audition after audition, because I've also done that, that is what you are literally in a room full of 4 people, 3 people, depending on what type of audition. And it's everyone's like, no, look at me, but look at me, but look at me. And that, you really have to. And so I get it. It's just,
But it ain't all Disney.
no, it's not.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
not,
saying?
yeah.
Like, it's not all Disney.
Yeah.
Like, that's like a Disney thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's like commercial. And then when you're going for like
Yeah.
theatrical, it gets a little different, but there's still a very competitive shell that must be like professionalism or
Yeah.
whatever it's interpreted as. But
Yeah.
I've seen people take it on and
Yeah.
it can be aggressive. I don't know. It's just,
Yeah. Well, I think that's also what happens when your only other friendships and relationships are inside the industry. Either if you're only friends with actors, it's only going to be like that. And that's why I always try to tell people, like, make friends outside of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, you'll understand how the real people who live in LA function. Because, you know, you get those, oh, LA is terrible and it's like this. It's like, no, like, build relationships with people outside of that little bubble
Yeah.
of yours. Because, it becomes almost self-fulfilling. It's like,
Did you talk about the rewriting process?
Briefly.
Did you-
So the rewriting kind of came from my actor friend, Jay Lee. His name's Jay
Yeah.
Lee. He's actually an actor on The Orville, and he was on my other podcast that I host.
I did a thing with Jay Lee.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did. Like it was like he had like a dinner show that he did right
Really?
when the Orville was starting.
Really?
And he had a bunch of like guests. You know, one of them
He's
Seth MacFarlane. He's
awesome.
like the nicest.
He's
guy.
so cool. He's like honorary member of my podcast, Nerds at the Cool Table.
Is he not on it? He's not a host. He's
No,
just
no,
like
no, no.
always on it?
No. He's just a friend of ours.
Oh,
Yeah, he came on because he's a friend of my buddy Jason's, and like he was like our first guest, and like we see him at Comic-Con every single year.
Right.
And he's the one who always gives us that like, hey, I'm going to this WB party. Hey, I'm going to this party, and he always like figures out a way to get us in.
Oh, that's cool.
And kind of introduces us to some of the people in his world.
Yeah.
Because he gets where we're coming from. Because he was a guy who sort of he started off as like he was
Receptionist.
like receptionist. And he ended up like on the Cleveland show and doing some voices on Family Guy. And now he's
Oh
like,
my gosh,
Yeah.
it's like a dream.
Oh,
What
Yeah.
he said was
Total
like
dream.
he was
Total
working
dream.
for Seth just as
Yeah.
the receptionist, and so
Receptionist.
Seth would just see him coming
Yeah.
in and out every day, in and out. And then I think what he said was that like one night Seth had to go to like some social thing, and Seth hates doing those,
Yeah.
and he like had a rapport with him. He's like, hey, do you want to come to this thing with me? Like it's gonna suck. So you should come.
Yeah.
And then they like really hit it
Yeah.
off, and kind of the next thing you know, like he's like on the Orville.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that is so
So you
dope.
never
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah, you
never
never
who you're
know.
Build
who you're gonna meet.
friendships, not just relationships.
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
genuine relationships,
Genuine, yeah.
friendships,
Yeah.
genuine.
Yeah.
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 And that's
Yeah,
the
not
thing.
our acquaintances. Sorry. Build friendships,
Yeah.
not just acquaintances.
Not acquaintances,
True.
or
Yeah.
like, some people look at people as like, what can you do for me?
What can you do for me?
What do you
yeah.
do?
And you know what? And,
Yeah.
if you've been doing
Yeah.
and if you've
Feel
been
it.
doing this long
Yes.
enough, and especially being born and raised in this town and working in it,
Same, yeah.
like you see that from a mile away,
Yeah.
and it just immediately just hits you off in the wrong, just the wrong way. You're like,
Yeah.
ugh.
And honestly,
Yeah.
it was like, for me, it was grating on me to the point where I was getting really depressed about it. Right before I joined Assorted Kinds, I was wondering like if I was just gonna have to kind of accept and give myself over to something
Yeah,
that I
oh,
wasn't
I
happy
feel that.
with if I
Damn.
wanted to
Yeah.
Do what you,
pursue
your art.
my
Yeah.
art.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And then the question's like, do I even want to do the art then? Or what's the
Absolutely.
point?
Oh my
Damn.
God.
And then you meet this group, and you're like, oh,
Oh my
Yeah.
maybe
God.
there is an alternative.
Right. There are humans out
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
Oh,
There are humans out
it's
there.
hard.
Oh.
It's just
Oh,
the world is so
want
big.
to give and receive.
And there's so many people out there that
Wow.
it can sometimes take you a while to find those people.
Yeah.
It's
But
so
don't give
true.
up, and keep your eyes out.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it's so true. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about. I mean, I'm not trying to jump into anything, but like you mentioned that when you told me this after you shot the film, that the experience was like, how was the experience for you? Like shooting it. If you said it felt very like
The energy in the
Yeah, the energy.
between the entire crew felt so easy, so safe, so supportive. I literally felt like I could just do whatever I needed to do, and there was no weird negativity or forced energy, and that was so awesome. I was like, I could do a million things with this crew because that's the energy, and it's so hard to find that.
yeah.
Just like what you were saying, I've done projects, mostly music stuff, but like the energy is not always that.
Yeah.
It's
A lot of egos.
A lot of egos, a
Yeah.
lot
Fear.
of fear, hostility, competition, just like craziness.
Yeah.
And you're trying to do your thing, like, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you feel it over your shoulder.
Yes,
and you're
it's
like,
like-
is that? I feel that dragon breathing on me.
Right. It's like it's relentless too.
And that's the thing. And like I do want to sort of in a way give myself credit for that because like I've been doing this for a while. I've been seeing how other directors work as well, and like one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the years is that like we're just making pretty pictures. We're not like all we got to do is just make the time, and it's like we'll get to where we need to get. And so for me, like because I've been at the bottom rung of the ladder before, I try to be as appreciative as possible to everybody helping me because I'm like. Otherwise, I'd be doing this by myself.
Right.
And I know what every role
Right.
like takes. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to be appreciative. Like for me, it was a revelation because like anything I'm shooting, even if it's like a fashion thing or a music video, like I have to like, a lot of the kind of like the mid to lower budget stuff, it's like I still have to be worried about some other things, because I might be sort of having hand in producing it.
Yeah, you gotta spread your mind pretty thin.
For this one, I felt so at ease because it's like all I have to worry is talking to you about backstory, talking to you about how would this feel. It gave like I was like, oh, all I have to worry about is like making sure the actors perform well. And so like it was for me, it was like, okay, this is something I've always done, but now I don't have to worry about the other things.
Right.
Yeah, I had the same thing when I was raised. It's
Yeah.
funny that you like had like a conscious noticing of that. I felt the same way where I was like, oh, this is it. Like this is what I've been trying to get to.
Yeah.
Is being able to clear my mind of those things.
Yeah.
And the communication was very good.
Yeah.
It was everyone communicated very well with each other. It was direct, but there was no belittling, no like negative. It was just like, hey, we need to do this, or let's change this. And it was just like, yes, that's how it can be done. Like, it was great.
Did you guys do did you guys get to do any rehearsals or anything like that beforehand?
We did
before
the day
you got on
the day
set?
before.
Yeah,
Okay.
shout out to Lou because we had met the day before.
Yeah.
And then we auditioned a few times.
Yeah.
Felt like we got it. And so let's take it home and live with it.
Yeah.
Come back
Yeah.
and do it. And I don't know, it was a good vibe
In the
between
space,
us.
like
Yeah,
that- like-
in the space. Yeah.
Thanks to Nicole's mom for letting us use the
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Because like we were able to
Shout out
rehearse.
to Barbara.
Yeah. We got a chance to rehearse and block in the space.
Yeah, that was very helpful.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Because then I think that's probably the way we could have turned it around that quick. Because if we had to do just rehearsal somewhere else and then try to figure out blocking and the lines, and we literally, it was.
Yeah. I know I totally just strayed, but back to the question you guys had asked me about the rewrites. So I know I mentioned my buddy Jay Lee. So originally I had
we
my
got
buddy.
all the way off on Jay Lee.
I already had some other
distracted us.
questions.
No, that's fine.
Write it down. Make sure you.
I just want to finish this up. So, because I had just interviewed him on my other podcast, I actually was like, oh, I want to work with him. I want to shoot something with him, and I sent him the script, and he was like, I'm not available those days, but he's like, these are some notes I can give you, and he gave me a little bit of notes, and it was mostly just a note on terms of like, if this story can the story work in this 2018, which is when I wrote it. If it can do that, if it can stand the test of time, essentially, then you got a great script. Another one was a detail about, because I mentioned something like, I think Sabi's character asks like, "Oh, this person," like, because he says like, "Oh, I know." So I know Eric was rooting for those guys or whatever.
Yeah, the dude from the bank.
The dude from the bank.
Yeah.
And she, in the original script, it says like, oh, the guy from work. And he's just like, she would know who he's talking about.
Yeah.
He must have mentioned this before.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay.
You don't
so
have to give it to the audience.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So what he
yeah.
allowed me to see was like, oh, okay, this couple has known each other for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
So like I was able to like trim it down and take out all these like things that were just exposition for the
Yeah.
audience. It's like,
That's
let's
good.
just,
Yeah,
That's
that
good.
is good.
So
It's
he
good to
kind
be able to do it in the script and not in your edit.
yeah. So he gave me that perspective. It was very small notes, but it was super appreciative.
Yeah, I guess great.
But yeah, that was my rewrite.
There's
Yeah.
an interesting like
Experience.
difference between what the characters know
Yeah.
and what you need to actually
Yeah.
tell the
Yeah.
audience. And
Right.
it's sometimes surprising how
Yeah.
much an audience can pick up
Right.
from feeling the characters and
Yeah.
not hearing those specifics.
Yeah.
You still,
Right.
Yeah,
get the vibe.
yeah. What other questions did you have?
Well, no, I mean, I forgot, but
Yeah.
Sorry, I totally fucked
it's
it up.
all good. It's all good, man.
Thanks a lot, Jaylee. You've ruined another podcast, Jaylee. You've ruined another podcast.
Well, okay, so we're talking about the location in regards to like getting to rehearse there, but I love the context of what the actual location represents for this story.
Okay.
David, do you recall the story?
A
that
little bit,
Nicole
but I
gave
want you to tell it.
So I'm going to paraphrase it because I also just kind of like a little bit, but Nicole, who's my significant other, her mom's house, and this is we call it the compound. This is where we all live. Her mom's house is where we filmed this, and when she was a kid and the riots were happening, what I recall as the story is that her grandfather, who seems like a wonderful man, I wish I could have met him. This may not be a wonderful thing that he did, but he electrified the fence. And it said, "Let him come," or something like that.
Wow.
Right? He's just like, "It will be all right." Like I just electrify the fence, and
Yeah.
they, we have what we call the zombie gate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So no one can get into the compound.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like
That's pretty dope. I don't know.
Yeah.
And he's just like, all right, let's see what and I think, oh man, I'm like, Nicole she's gonna kick me when she hears me telling the story, but like I'm pretty sure someone touched it and like something happened, but maybe not. I don't know.
It just sounds cool.
There's a body buried in the backyard.
Yeah.
We should go dig up the backyard. There's a body back there.
But like the fact that because the street. There was like National Guard marching down the street.
Yeah.
Like, we're like in close proximity to where the riots were happening.
down Vermont, because there's a lot of like that whole chunk of Vermont where you guys live. There's footage of like a lot of those shopping centers just burning down.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah.
So this is the same place.
Yeah.
The compound is like a very. It's a compound. It's a property. You call it your like her mom's house, but like I feel like that's shortchanging.
Yeah,
how
the
much
house
space
is one
it's
of
actually
3 lots that
right.
her family owns and has kind of bought up over time.
Wow.
Like her grandmother and her grandmother's sister. After World War II, and then after they were in internment camps, bought one of the 3 plots of land, moved there, and then they all kind of like congregated there and kind of started building a family.
Amazing.
Wow, so it's like actually attached to the history.
That's
the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Pretty cool.
Like, but that little anecdote speaks to sort of the sort of almost post-apocalyptic sort of mentality people had.
That's what I was gonna say.
Because if you think about terrible things happening in a city, right, and like you think about stuff that happened in Ferguson, 5 years ago, if something can, you think, oh, it's gonna die off in like a day, but if it doesn't and it keeps going, I mean, look at what happened in Ferguson. Like it just kept coming and going and going and going. At the time, nobody had ever seen that, and I try to think to myself, I'm like, we didn't have social media back then. We only had the news.
Right.
So nobody knew what was happening in like 2 towns over or like what was even happening. You just saw shit breaking. You saw stuff like sort of going in flames and you're like, okay, so the world is ending. So what are we going to do? You know what I mean?
Protect what we got.
Yeah. And it's like, it happens one day. It's like, all right, it might die down. No, it's still going. Oh, it's going up to Hollywood. Oh, the world might end. I don't know. So that kind of speaks to what people were thinking. And like, if you don't have only the news to tell you like, hey, you better stay in your homes. What are you gonna do? So you kind of
Electrify the fence.
Electrify the fence. You kind of understand what people were thinking.
Yeah,
Damn.
totally.
Well,
you want to jump into like some of the production stuff?
Yeah,
and talk about
sure.
the visual style. I really liked how realistic it looked, especially after this podcast is coming after our Future Jest podcast, which is maybe the opposite direction, right? It was very colorful, very surrealistic, but this, I mean, of course, it lends itself to the story. It's very grounded, but is that something that you talked with Darren
so
about?
shout out to Darren, who's not here today, unfortunately, but he shot it, and Darren's another sort of relationship I have. I've been shooting films with Darren since film school. I met Darren when I was like 18 in Matt Brooks, and like I shot 3 short films in film school, and he DP'd one of them. So we've been partners sort of like in different projects, and he's shot some of the music videos I've done, some of the fashion films I've done. So we've been kind of working together for pretty much my entire career, both of our careers. And doing a narrative has always been something that we're like, well, we'll do one. We'll eventually do one, And, he was also one of the people that brought me into Assorted Kinds along with Chris.
Oh, nice.
And so, like, I knew that the film that I made, because I had been telling him about, I want to do something set in the riots, right? And I knew that I was like, well, he's going to shoot it. I already told him, I was like, you're going to shoot it because we've been meaning to do this for years.
Right, yeah.
And when I finally pitched it, one of the references we talked about a lot was Training Day.
Oh, okay.
The movie Training Day, where it felt very, it was very raw, but there was some polish to it a little bit. And so that was definitely one of the big references that we wanted to go with, just because of like, just that, even the way, Sabi's skin looked and the way Lou's skin looked, like we wanted to kind of give it that almost sheen of like, some of that realism to it. You know?
Sweat.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
I remember
I like
that
to call
being
it
a
sheen.
conversation. Yeah, I remember that being a conversation going
Yeah.
into it. Did I?
Yeah.
It was hot.
Yeah, it was definitely hot. It was definitely hot. But yeah, like it was, you know, Training Day was definitely a huge influence on like the look of it and how we wanted it to sort of feel. Yeah, I think.
And the funny thing is, when I look at it, I think, or like, I can imagine a layman looking at it and being like, oh, it just wasn't lit. It wasn't lit. But that's not the case.
No, not at all.
But so as a nerd, I'm more curious, like, how did you guys, you know, to go too deep into it, but like, how did you guys achieve that look of it being like an interior house with the lights not on? There's not lights on everywhere.
Man, I wish I could relay
Did
that.
you guys have smoke?
We did. Oh yeah, that was
some
another thing. We
atmosphere
had some atmosphere in there with like some like sort of a hazer, just to kind of give it that.
I like smoke.
Yeah, it was definitely smoke. It was a hazer, sort of to create depth in the shot, but it kind of
some blacks.
Yeah, and it definitely what it does add to it is like if there was smoke around, you know, in the air, obviously there'd be some trailing into people's homes and stuff. So that's kind of how you add it in universe or in story or whatever. But yeah, that was used to create depth. I wish I could relay more of the questions to Darren in terms of like, you know, the choices and like how to light it. But I think he did want it to sort of feel, not too overlit.
Most of it natural lighting?
No, it was outside. A lot of the lights were outside.
Yeah, they were coming through the windows.
Right. Yeah, they were
I
shot.
never saw
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, you didn't have to think about that. You're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's certainly a tough thing when you're trying to
Yeah.
make it feel like all the lights coming from outside, but the sun moves and you're shooting. Even if the scene
Right.
takes place over 6 minutes,
Yeah.
Right.
you're shooting over 12
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Right.
how do you do that?
Yeah.
You have to stick
And
lights
that comes
outside.
from, and honestly, like, you know, somebody who probably hadn't worked with with a DP would see that and think like, oh, it feels, you know, depending on how their conversation is, like they would sort of question it. But because I've worked with Darren for years, I trust it. I trust him. I trust his choices. I trust his choices as a DP. Obviously, I'll push on them. You know what I mean? But I know that eventually the final product is gonna look a certain way because it's like his, you know, he has a certain style that I'm using to achieve what I want to achieve.
And that's great because I know, you know, I've worked with a couple different DPs now, and there's essentially just a first, you know, it's a first time working with them, and there's a sort of a big unknown that you ultimately kind of have to make the choice because you don't have a lot of time to just sit back and let them do their thing.
Yeah.
But I can imagine it's a lot more easy to do when you've been working with them for years.
Yeah.
What about like style of camera movement? Like, did you choose to let the camera be a character or fly on the wall?
So yeah, that was another thing too. Is like since the majority of a lot of the work that I do, a lot of the documentary stuff that I do is very sort of. I try to make my documentary work very cinematic. There's like a verite aspect to it, and I guess I wanted to maintain that in this film because I didn't want to make a shaky cam. But I did want sort of like that realism to kind of come through in terms of the camera movement. And that's why we had a rig. What's it called again?
Easy rig.
The easy rig.
Steady
Yeah.
rig, one of the two.
Easy rig.
Yeah.
To sort of maintain that, like, like we can keep it steady, but also like we want to have some realistic movement in it. And that's why, like, you know, I went through different thought processes. Like, I was like, oh, I can do this almost very verite, like, you know, just camera movements and almost like moving, you know, but Darren sort of came in and wanted to make it a little bit more polished. And so sort of we met in the middle, you know what I mean, to sort of kind of give it that kind of more polished look, you know. Yeah.
Cool.
Instead of being so raw.
Right.
Yeah. How did you feel about your look? Let's talk about your look, like just the way your hair looked and like what kind of, because I remember, so you sent me your choices and what you wanted to do with your hair, and I was like, perfect, do what you need to do.
I was trying to think about what was going on in the 90s. A lot of plaid. My hair was blow dried straight, but it was sort of like in a shoulder length, which was sort of like a thing.
Yeah.
I had French tip nails, hoop earrings. That was a thing, like, you know, especially in the Black and brown
That's awesome.
community.
Yeah.
So I was like, let's just do that, you know? Yeah. And it was easy. And I had like my grandpa's sweater, shirt, plaid shirt.
Did you choose your own wardrobe?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it, and then I just sort of pulled it together. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But I do that normally, so it's like
Yeah.
easy. So whatever.
No, but see, like that was the thing, like because
Yeah.
we were on the same page on like
Yeah.
the era, and those are things that she's thinking about, like how the black and brown community looked, like
Yeah.
let's add that flavor in there. You know what I mean? I didn't want to be too like. It was more for me. It was just like yes and no. It was like, oh, she sent me 2-3 options, and I was like, I like this one.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're like, yeah, I like this one too. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, let's go with that. So yeah.
Totally.
I want to give a little nod to Jacob Kern-Morella's
Yes.
and Henry for art department on
Yes,
that one.
yes.
They did like a lot of really subtle things.
Very subtle details.
Oh, my art was in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was another thing I wanted to mention. Yeah.
I totally forgot.
Where is that?
Oh, it's in some of
In
the
some of the scenes.
some of the scenes.
The hand painted stuff.
that are on the walls.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
stuff. But yeah, back to
Yeah.
the art crew.
Yeah.
I mean, it just did there was moments where you just saw them hustling, like
Yeah.
just to like build stuff out, and like
Yeah.
we're doing this all in one day, and like, I don't know, they did what they did was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing that I appreciated because, like, a lot of people wouldn't notice it, but like, there's
That's good.
Yeah, it was good, but that's the thing. It's good that it's not noticeable, but at the same time, it's like the thing about certain period pieces, like, especially 90s and 80s period pieces, they try to go
Yeah.
to 90s,
Yeah.
Yeah.
where it's like almost looks like a parody.
Yeah.
And, I remember when I spoke to Jacob about this when we were kind of sort of planning this out, and he was just like, he said something like, well, if this was 92, most people wouldn't have a TV from 92. They would have a
No,
TV
yeah.
from like 85 or
Right,
something.
for sure.
And I was like, that makes so
Yep.
much sense. you
Yeah,
know?
when I
And-
saw those knobs, it took me right
Yeah.
back. I was like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah, you're not gonna
my
have-
kitchen TV.
like
you
my
know?
TV,
Got that one
my
in the
TV is
kitchen.
from like 2009 and it still works. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like, yeah, for sure. I was like, you would have a TV from like 85, 83 or something. So those little details here and there, just kind of peppered around the set and during some of the shots, it's like, oh, it actually felt lived in. It felt real. And like again, shout out to Barbara for like her, her fantastic living room that is like, it's almost timeless. So yeah.
But did we mention that the exterior
Yeah.
is not that
Yeah.
location?
Yeah.
Oh, right. It's
Movie
down the
magic.
street.
Yeah.
So my buddy Tommy also lives on my street, and he has he's like six units down the street, and he had a front yard. We don't have a front yard. We have a big backyard, but no front yard.
Yeah.
And so I
And the
just
front
like,
yard's such an important
Yeah,
part
yeah.
of
Yeah.
the thing.
'Cause
I
I had-
remember
I-
talking
yeah.
about that beforehand, like you have to find
Yeah,
a separate
yeah.
location.
And
we just
yeah,
walked production down the street.
yeah. Thankfully, it was like just right down the
That's good.
street. Yeah.
Right.
I was going to ask you how you
Yeah,
did that.
it was
You
fine.
drove all the way across town.
Yeah,
but
no.
It's
No.
just next door.
It was no,
That's
it was great because like even the I don't know what his house looks like inside, but out front, it actually looks like the house I grew up in.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
That's cool.
From the outside, it's like this. I don't even know the style of it, but it looks like that. There was a front porch and everything. So yeah, the front yard was very important.
yeah. Shout
And
out-
it was great. It
Right.
looked great, and it matched perfectly.
Right.
and,
Right.
Yeah,
in
you
the
would have
edit.
known.
That's why I wanted to
Never
mention it
would
because
know.
like
No
you
idea.
never would have known.
Yeah,
Shout out to Tommy and Aaron. Thanks guys. Thanks for saying yes to the inquiry.
yeah,
You know, we talk a lot about this whole like this idea of like you get through the film and then you get into post and you're the filmmaker and you're like kind of on your own,
yeah,
and you have this like fatigue of like getting through that check mark, right? And now you got to go like edit the thing. You got to put it all together. And
yeah.
even in like an 6
Gotta
minute
finish it,
film,
yeah.
even in a 6 minute film, it's like, damn,
yeah,
this is gonna be so much work.
yeah,
Fuck.
yeah.
And so, like, tell me about going into that.
It's I feel like it's the perfect sort of like self-contained metaphor for adulthood. That's one of the biggest. That's the biggest things about adulthood is that you realize nobody's coming to rescue you. You're kind of on your own boat out in the and the thing is at the same time that you're on your own boat, there's the endless possibilities of where you can go, which is fantastic and beautiful, but it's also frightening.
I hate it.
And so like
I hate
you know,
hate it.
I know. I hate it and love it. But yeah, so like for me, kind of going back to like, I'm so used to sort of producing and creating content for somebody else. Either it's a music video or a fashion film or a, branded content video. It's always for somebody else. It's, it's definitely my creative, but it's not my original sort of thing, right? It's for somebody else, somebody's schedule, somebody's deadline. This was sort of like ever since sort of film school. It was like even film school. It was for an assignment. You know what I mean? It was sort of my first true piece of art that was for me. And at the time, thank you very much.
Sabi's clapping.
Thank you. And at the time, we still didn't have the Assorted Kinds sort of schedule. I mean, it wasn't even called Assorted Kinds at the time.
We didn't have a name for a while.
We didn't. There was no release schedule. We just thought it was like, we'll just put it out and figure it out. And so like there was no like, oh, you're gonna put it out in a year, or you're gonna put it out in 6 months. There was none of that. It was just like,
the abyss.
Yeah, you have a film.
Point, man.
It's like, hey, you got a film in the can. Great, go and edit it. Do what you need to do with it.
Yeah.
And so there was that. And like at the time, it's like, even though I knew, so because a lot of the work that I did was either music videos or documentaries, you know, music videos don't always, they have their structure, they have their song structure, but there's no, like the shots that you shoot aren't always going to be in order. You know, there's going to be something else.
Montage style.
Yeah, it's montage style or whatever. Or like if it's a documentary, the documentary gets built in the edit. You know what I mean? This one, so any narrative thing that I would do, whether it was a narrative music video, I was like, oh, this is great. I know exactly where everything's going to be. I thought I was going to feel the same way. I thought I was going to be like, sit down, like, well, I know what it's going to be. And like, it's going to be here and there. There was something almost intimidating about my own work that I was just like, why can't I sit down and finish this? I know how it ends. And it wasn't so much an excuse, but it was like, you know, there was some VFX aspect to it that I didn't realize until after I had shot the film, that I was just like, oh, this needs visual effects. And like, I already had a few people in mind that I wanted to send this. So I didn't have that like worry, but it was just like, oh, I have to sort of, consider this. And I was almost using that as like an excuse for me to sort of keep it sort of like delaying it. It was like, oh, this person's busy, so I can't really finish anything. And because I was like busy with other things, I got busy with other work, I was just like, well, I'm gonna just, and like I said, there was no established thing of when we needed to put it out. So I didn't really, you know, I want to say I almost didn't give it that importance. I was just like, well, I have this film and it's gonna be sort of like my, you know, if I need to put something out, if the content dries up, I'm going to put this out. I'm going to put it on put it in festivals. And so like, you know, it's not until actually this year, you know, after I had released it and everything, that I went to Comic-Con and I went to a panel about like making your own films and stuff, like feature films. And that a post-production supervisor or producer said, after you make a film, there is a period of depression afterwards. And it, in a way, blew my mind because I was like, I thought I was the only one. And the thing is, like, even over the course of like the past year, like speaking with Chris on his film and, you know, kind of bonding over that, like, oh, I don't know how to finish my film. I was like, oh, wow, we're really weird. What's wrong with us? But hearing it from a professional who has no connection to me, who has been doing this for years, I was like, oh, this is a thing. It's not like I'm not just the odd man out. So I had already released my film, so I didn't, you know, I was like, oh, but it actually validated a little bit of my feelings from the previous year.
You're able to reflect on
it. I was able to reflect on it. So I was like, okay, I don't feel so guilty about that so much anymore. But the process was even the way I edited it was a little unorthodox. I actually edited it in reverse. I edited the final scene first.
Well, it's like
goes
the
back
writing,
to the writing,
though, you know?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
not that unorthodox.
Yeah. I edited the
knew
film in
that,
reverse.
yeah.
I edited the final scene first, and then I kind of just like moved backwards in time and just kind of like, you know, cut it together. And I think I had like an actual full cut until December. So 6 months later, it was like when I had an actual like first draft of it.
How many different, like, did you have a lot of different versions of takes that you were going through, or did you guys feel like you really kind of solidified that on set?
We were on average, I think, 3 to 4 takes for each shot.
Right.
Because like Sabi did like fantastic job,
Thank
and
you.
like Lou did a fantastic job. I feel like the toughest part for me, because I did cut out like maybe a couple of like maybe like half of a page of lines, because like there was a moment where the kid says something at the end, and there's like a moment, an interaction between the dad and the kid before they go outside. So there is an interaction inside that I cut out because it just felt like it kind of brought the movie to a halt. So I just felt like it kind of seemed a little silly. So I took that out. But yeah, I felt like we had gotten it. I think the only real like, it was like average 3 to 4 takes essentially.
I'm gonna like poke a little hole in that and just say that I do remember there being we like went into like 8 or 9 takes just because you were curious. You were like playing.
Yeah.
And I do remember
Doing
it.
What part?
We were in the bedroom. I remember we were like playing in the bedroom, and there was like a ton of takes. And I remember walking up to Derek, who was our first AD. And it was his first time. AD. I just looked up the credits and realized that I was the producer on this.
Congrats.
I often say it with a sort of kind of like I forget what role I'm playing on these things. I'm just helping.
But this time I actually was vocal about, Chris, you're producing this for me, because I was like, no, nice. I want you.
You said to me, you're like, hey, will you do it? I was like, oh, damn, this one's heavy. I'm like, I want to have your back, but like I also need a break. And then like because no one a lot of times, especially in the early days, like nobody else would really step up to take that producer role because it's
it's overwhelming.
Well, I mean, it isn't, but like
it's not, but like it feels overwhelming just by
when you think about it. When you think about like what it entails, it's like, and a lot of our members like just want to be filmmakers. They're like directors, or like writer directors, or they're DPs, and they're just like, I don't want to do that.
It's that same abyss, though. I feel like being a producer of just like. It could be anything. Like you could be dealing with anything.
You could be dealing with anything.
Like,
that's what I was thinking about.
I don't produce specifically because I had to deal with some things producing. I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to do this anymore.
But this ended up, it ended up working out well because we were shooting on our property.
Right, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
It
made more sense.
But we didn't, you looked at quite a few locations beforehand. And we just like, listen, man.
I asked around. And
like we got the property, just do it on the property. Like it'll work. We'll make it work.
We'll make it work. Yeah.
But Derek, who came on first AD it, right? Like he, he's moving things along as a first AD. Yeah, that's cool. But when it came to like trying to like challenge the director on like, yo, man, like move it along.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't remember why. I think it might have been because
you were playing. I think that's
where we started it too. That's where we started.
It is where we started.
It is where we started.
Yeah.
It takes a lot
warming up.
Takes a lot to get in the groove.
And that's kind of another thing I want to talk about that I should have talked about it before in production. Sabi and I had this conversation even like on set where I learned very like even after the fact that when the camera was between her and when the camera was behind her and we were focused on Lou, we did that first, and then we did a bunch of takes there, and then we moved it over to her. There was something that I realized now as a director, I didn't give her a note to sort of kind of give me 50% because she gave 100% when the camera was over her shoulder.
Damn.
And so she was exhausted because it's an emotional scene.
Yeah, that was a very emotional.
And it was something that we talked about even on set. Like, and I realized that after the fact, I was like, oh, now I know. Like,
right.
I exhausted her. Before I even got a chance to look at her.
Right.
So
and this is the thing too. Was a note for me too because I had learned that in the project I did before, but that was like a year and some change ago.
Yeah.
So I forgot. Like, don't do that yet until it's on you.
Yeah.
And then like I took an acting class and I asked the teacher who like does a lot of this stuff and I was like, am I in the right or wrong? He's like, never give 100% when the camera's not on you. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So,
noted.
Yeah, noted.
Yeah.
So we totally talked about it because I was exhausted and you're like, okay, now we're gonna do you. I was like,
oh my god. She was very and like visibly exhausted.
I like cried and all this stuff like 10 times and like
get this human some coffee.
And I remember I noticed it and I took her aside and I was like, are you okay? And you were like, I'm just tired. You know what I mean? It's just a lot. And I was like, okay. And I was just like, oh, it like clicked. And that's part of the learning process. But like, it also made me like, I felt a little guilty. I was like, oh man, I should
don't feel guilty.
Yeah.
That's also to me too. It's like a learning lesson for me. I was like, I will never do that again.
It also might have contributed to the character because the character would have been exhausted with the idea.
True. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, some directors actually use things like that as a technique where they like take their talent into a room and tire them out.
Yeah.
Right. Like
I did learn. So the whole thing about sort of tiring an actor, I also did learn that. I learned that in terms of just like directing a child actor. I've directed a child actor.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So like I directed one of the shorts that I did in film school, it had a cast of 2 kid actors. And it was a silent film. Obviously, there was no sound or anything like that. So it was my experience with directing kids. I hadn't done that in like over 10 years. And for this one, the kid was fantastic. Thai, Korea. He was fantastic. Knew his lines. Knew exactly like where he was supposed to stand and everything. But it was almost, for a story like this, I learned that like you almost have to sort of remove so it's almost like their preconceived notions of what this is. And in a way, I almost wish I would have had more time with him, because it's like I almost had to tell him, like, almost wear him down a little bit. It sounds awful, but it's like I kind of had to wear him down a little bit and kind of tire him out of doing the same thing over and over, because, the idea is that this kid is, he's not happy about doing things. He's just kind of living his life, and almost kind of make him forget the camera was in front of him. And like the thing was that he was very aware. And I think it's, there are some great naturalistic child actors that seem like they were plucked off the street. But I feel like not every kid is like that. And every kid, there are some kids who are very aware of being an actor and being on. And he was very aware of being on.
Right.
But this wasn't the film for that. This was definitely a film that required you to sort of not be on and be sort of like feel like you're plucked off the street. So I almost had to sort of do it very quickly and almost like tire him out and be like, no, you need to do this without acknowledging that we're in front of you. So that was a learning experience for me in terms of like having a child actor in a certain type of film.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about that, but it probably has something to say to how they're trained. I know like there's a lot of emphasis on like, you need to focus because you're in a professional situation, but you're a child and you're not predisposed to that. So I have to like beat into you. Like you have to just like act very specifically. Make sure you're doing everything like on cue and to this exact thing.
If this was a commercial, it would have been fantastic.
Right, it worked out, but that's not what you're looking for.
Again, it's that thing of like the actor world of like, I'm on.
Yeah,
I'm great.
I'm selling toothpaste.
Exactly.
Exactly. But yeah, Ty was fantastic. His mother was fantastic. They were very appreciative of like when the film came out. They thought they loved it.
Cool.
So yeah, he definitely
he was sweet.
He was very sweet. He was a very sweet kid. So yeah.
I want to get your story about working with a VFX company, but I also, something we glazed over that I really wanted to kind of talk about was like when you were talking about the like not finishing thing. It just kind of like brought me back to thinking about what I was struggling with Future Jazz.
Yeah.
And this whole like how hard it is to show up for yourself.
Talk about it.
Well, I want to get your perspective on it. Yeah. Just like when you're just like, oh, I don't have a deadline. I'm not obligated to. Not obligated to a thing. Like, I don't have a client paying me.
Yeah.
And I'll get in like, oh, like I'm afraid to ask for the VFX or for whatever it is. It's gonna keep you from doing it. Yeah. And then it takes you a year to finish it. And looking back on that and thinking about going into the next project. How would you plan to do it differently so that you don't deal with that same problem again?
I honestly don't know.
You mentioned a couple times kind of offhanded like that. When we were doing it, we did not have that release schedule.
Yeah.
For me, it's just like that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Like my whole life is just like, I only have to be responsible for myself. Well, then I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So that's why I came here. I was just like, you guys are going to tell me that once a month I need to have a script ready. So it's the same thing. Like do you think that helped once we had that?
Yeah. So I say I don't know, but like I've talked about it because I have a few like scripts that I've written that I want to do, that I want to make in the group. And like I feel like one of the script I presented last time, which was Notice Me, that we haven't done yet. But I've told you that for that film, I know that I want to finish that one immediately and put it out maybe even 2 months later because I know where I know where it's going to get the best audience and I know where I have the most relevance. You know what I mean? If I took it to a festival, fine, but it's not going to reach the audience that I want. And I feel like it depends on the film that I'm making. Like if I do another film that's a little bit more dramatic, that's a little bit more sort of, I might sort of kind of go like, maybe I want to put it on a festival first and see what happens. But like,
you still got to finish it fast.
You still got to finish
it into the festival circuit so you can release it in a year's time.
I don't know, because I'm still dealing with that with like my own personal stuff, because it's essentially my own art, right? You know, like I'm a filmmaker. That's my art and that's my profession. I feel like Sabi gave me some really good advice while I was in post. She said that you just got to put it out and let whatever's supposed to come to you as a result. And it stuck with me, you know, and it was just like, it's just, you know, I don't know, like I could only imagine what's going to happen if I don't have it out, you know, but once I put it out, it's just out in the world. And I've been going through, so, you know, I put it out in June, and I've submitted it to like a few online festivals, and like I submitted it to AFI Film Festival. I haven't gotten any notes on that, so I don't know. I'll probably find that out in October. But the other film festivals, I submitted it to Short of the Week, No Budge, Director's Notes, and Flux events, which it was actually for today. Today is the Flux event. I got rejected from that.
They rejected it.
Okay. And so I've gotten rejected about 3 times already with this film.
Rejection feels like a dagger.
It does. And it's like, you know, it's
yeah, whatever.
Whatever, man.
No, but it's you know, I've dealt with rejection a lot, like in my line of work, you know, as a music video director. One of the things that they've never told you is that you're going to spend most of your career writing more than directing.
Yeah, for sure.
And so like I have amazing treatments that I've probably like live in a void somewhere, you know what I mean?
The script vault or the catacombs.
Yeah, so much so that I've actually regurgitated certain concepts, because I'm like, well, this didn't work for this person, I'm going to use it for this.
Sure.
So like I've built a thick skin when it comes to rejection for jobs or whatever. But this was different for, you know, obviously because it's my own work, but this was different because like the work is there.
Yeah.
It's not just an idea. The work is there.
Right.
And so I've been sort of dealing with that for the past few months where it's like, I'm kind of like pulling those daggers out and kind of like, oh, okay, this is a different type of rejection I've never felt before. I was like, and because I've dealt with it in other aspects, I'm healing a little quicker, but it's something new. And I'm just like, I have to sort of what it makes, and I saw this from I think Kevin Smith talked about this recently, in terms of because he's doing Jay and Silent Bob reboot, and he talks about he's
What's up?
he's talking about how like he did this film, and when he put out the trailer, he was just like, you know what, I hope people love it, because it's like, if people don't love it, I'm going to have to start sort of, he says he has a tendency to sort of distance himself from his work that gets rejected. Because he's like, I take that criticism so to heart if it's something that I've put my heart and soul into.
I mean, he's an auteur's auteur.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You know,
he said that, he said something along the lines, I was like, but you know what? The reason why I knew I was going to feel that way is because I know I had so much fun making this. I put my love into this, and I put everything into this, and because people saw that and people like resonating with those characters they hadn't seen in years, they loved it. So it made me feel good about it. And I realized like, because I loved what I was fine if people didn't love it.
Right. It's both, it puts you out on that precipice, but it's also a safety net.
Yeah. So what I'm doing, I'm trying to like, be like, no, this is my work. If those people rejected it, it has nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? It's, you know, I put it out, I put something out. And the reactions that I've had and the people's, you know, responses, you know, people who aren't filmmakers, that's another thing. I've gotten more responses from people that are not filmmakers or in the artistic community, just everyday people that are in LA, family members, you know, friends of friends, respond to that more so than filmmakers. Yeah. And it was like, oh, this does resonate with everybody. And me and you have talked about this, where it's like, we're making films. We want to make films for everybody, not just for filmmakers, you know? And
that's why we're putting on YouTube.
On YouTube,
and not Vimeo specifically.
Yeah. If you tell people it's on YouTube, like, oh, of course.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But the average person is not necessarily tuned into Vimeo.
No way. Filmmakers and studios and Vimeo staff pick people.
Interesting. So, you know, I've learned to sort of appreciate, like, I went through this, it probably was like maybe a month where I was just like, I didn't want to distance myself from it, but it was just like, well, okay, I got to work on another one, which I still feel, but I'm relearning how to reappreciate, and having these conversations right now is kind of continuing that for me. And I was just like, I made this is mine. And you know what I mean?
And you loved it.
Yeah.
You made it.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So that was something that I'm sort of been going through the past past 2 months.
Something.
Yeah.
I mean, when you came back and you were talking about that, that post producer talking about the fatigue or the depression period, right?
Yeah.
And it made me really think about, reflect on my experience with Future Jess, think about your experience with this project, and then think about ways that we could really, support each other better when we get to post, right? And there's a lot we can do in pre-production to plan for post that we're not doing because the original group is like, oh, we're like DIY filmmakers. We're just like, we'll figure it out, like figure out the edit. Well, that's great, but like not all of us are like steamrollers.
Yeah.
Right. I credit, Matt Davino, who's one of the kind of founding members of Assorted Kinds. He's a steamroller. He'll just plow through it. He doesn't overthink it.
Yeah. No.
Right. And I'm like,
that inspires me a little.
It
bit.
inspires me. Yeah, for sure. And yet that's not me.
Right. Same.
That's not you.
Yeah.
And so when I think about especially the producer role, like the next time I say yes to be a producer, I'm saying yes to be a producer to the end.
Yeah. No, same. I
Right?
mean, we've talked about this, and I think this is going to be the first film because, I'm producing the film for this month for Scott. And you just reminded me, I'm gonna have a conversation with him one of these days where I'm gonna like, hey, who do you want to edit this? We got to make a decision on an editor so that once we're done with it, are you editing it? So, I want to have that conversation with him and be like, all right, we're gonna send it to Chris. I think the thing too is like, I think we talked about this, is that for this film, I realized like, oh, I need a colorist and a sound mixer, which like because I took so long to making it happen, I didn't schedule the sound mixer I wanted, which Kamal, who did the sound on the film, I wanted him to mix the sound in post. But because I didn't get to him till much later, he wasn't available until like a week after we were supposed to release. So I couldn't get to him to do that.
Yeah.
And
but
so,
if you would have set it up,
if I would have set it up
months
before,
in advance,
he would have just done the sound. It was like, would have been great. Right. So now I know for like other things I do, I'm like, all right, I got to keep a colorist in mind, a sound mixer in mind for the post section of it, Yeah.
So real quick, tell us about the relationship with the VFX house and how that came about.
Oh, that was by chance. It was like, cause originally I had, a buddy of mine actually was, who's a VFX artist. He's currently working on Joker. Shout out to Eric.
That's Joker's gonna be rad.
I had told him about it. And he was like, yeah, for sure. Like, I'll do it for you, whatever. And he gave me some advice on even how to shoot some of the scenes. Because he was like, if you do this, just make sure that the camera doesn't move this way or, moves to, And so with that in mind, I knew, I was like, all right, we're going to shoot this shot like this. It's going to be a plate. And so, like, I had that in mind already. Because I went through this depression, you know what I mean, after. And he got busy. It was just kind of like one of those things like, well, he's busy, so I can't really like. So the months went on and stuff like that. He got busy, did his own thing. But then the beginning of this year, I was out looking for work. So I was like having meetings with different people. And I reached out to a producer at NBC who I had worked under before. And pretty much just to ask him for a job. I was like, hey, man, I need a job. What do you have? And he was like, I don't have anything for you, but I can recommend to you certain people to reach out, either creative producers or producers. And he gave me the name and number, an email of this creative director named Joel Lava, who works at Stun Creative, where they do a lot of promos and stuff. And I had a lunch meeting with him. He was like one of the only people who reached. He gave me like a list of emails, and he was the one, I think, only person who reached back out. And he was like, "Yeah, I'm down to have a lunch." And we went to go have lunch, and it was essentially a lunch for me to ask for a job. I was like, "Hey, look, I need a job, like producer, creative director, whatever." Like, and during that lunch meeting, I told him what I had been working on. I was like, "Yeah, like I just need a job because I'm trying to like fund my narrative stuff." It was like, a job to pay the bills, but this is what I'm really kind of dedicated to. And I told him about Assorted Kinds. I told him that I was been working on my film, and the film that I did was, the reason why I hadn't finished it was because like I need VFX. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And at the end of the lunch, he was like, hey man, let me do the VFX for that. He's like, we have a full on, like I have some VFX artists that would want to work on something like that. I was like, for sure. He's like, yeah, I'll do it, for nothing. I was like, okay, sure. But it's one of those things like, yeah, of course you will.
Right.
And he emails me
another rug.
Yeah.
Forget about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Damn.
Yeah, he
You say
emails
it.
me like 2 weeks later. He's like, "Hey, I'm really interested. Like, send me the stuff." And I was like,
Damn.
"Sure."
Yeah.
So I cut out the shots that I needed. Based on the advice I had gotten the year before, I just cut the specific shot I needed. I didn't give him a whole thing. It was just, okay, this from this point to this point, this is where we're gonna see that. So I sent him 2 shots. One was like the shot of behind the kid where we see the smoke the first time, and the next shot was like the final scene where we see the big smoke in front of the house. And so I sent him those 2 shots. And I just sent him. I was like, all right, whatever, right? And maybe I don't remember how many weeks later it was. And he's like, hey, we worked on it. Oh, and I sent him references. I was like, this is how I want it to look. And a couple weeks later, he's like, oh, here's the smoke. I was like, oh my God. And he sent me the shots. And he was like, do you have any notes? I was like, actually, yeah, I do. So I went into director mode. I was like, all right, can we get this one to look thinner and this one to look more overwhelming? And they came back, I think 3 or 4 more times. And he's like, are we good? Is this? I was like, no, this looks fantastic. And then I think I had just spoken to Davina. We had a meeting here. Yeah. And I told Davina, I was like, look, this is the shot that we have. He's like, dude, you should ask him to put helicopters in it. I was like, man, I'm not going to do that. He's doing it for free. And the next day I was just like, oh, these are fantastic. I was like, now I need a bunch of helicopters in the shot. And I was like, I'm kidding, but it looks fantastic. Thanks so much. And he comes back to me like a week later. It's like, hey, we added helicopters. We wanted to play around. I was like,
seed planted.
He's like, I was like, really? I was like, okay. I was like, by the way, all right, here's some notes. And then I went into director mode. I was like, have these helicopters here and here and here. And he's like, sure. And then they added those notes, and it was like, it looked a little too fake. And I think the day after, there was like some helicopter activity in my neighborhood over by MacArthur Park where there was like 3 helicopters circling. I was like, that's exactly how I want them to look. So I literally like stopped my car and filmed it with my iPhone, and I sent them. I was like, hey, here's the visual references. This is exactly how I want the helicopters to look. And they got back to me like 2 weeks later. I was like, okay, here they are. And that was the shot. And I was like, this looks fantastic. And I think like, while that was happening, because other people were working on it, I was like, I need to finish this film. Yeah. And so like, over pretty much the first half of the year, I was like, I've got to finish this film. And like June or May rolled around, and, Matt was like, I think we need to put your film out. I was like, all right, fine. And so like, it was just like sprinting to like finish it. And they had sent me the stuff. I finished the edit. And, luckily Darren was in town. I was able to get him to like color it, and literally down to the wire, like I uploaded the film.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah. I mean, you were. I think you guys were coloring it till like
three
the
or
night
four.
up. The night up.
Yeah, 3 or 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
And we put it out, and it was just like, all right, we got it out.
Yep.
And it was kind of like one of those down to the wire, which it's not the best way to do it. Like I was like, I shouldn't be doing those kind of down. It's fun and exhilarating, but it's not. I'm too old for that. I can't be doing that. Like it's not one of those things. I mean, I guess I have to pick and choose what I do those in. It's like, I'm not making money off of it. I should just like do it normally. I shouldn't do it like that.
Stressed out.
Yeah, I shouldn't stress myself out like that. Yeah.
So then we released it. Do you guys want to talk at all about some of the reactions
Yeah,
of
Sabi,
people you showed
tell
it
me
to?
some of the reactions.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, they felt like they were in that tense energy that the characters were sort of like swirling between each other. Like my sister was like, whoa, I really felt like those darts you shot at him, like when he walked through the door, and then like I've had like my aunt talk about her past experience being brought up, but then like my dad was like, yeah, no, it really was like that. Like it was crazy watching it on the news, and crazy just, and you guys were little, and, but I don't know, everyone really related to this thing of like, what would I do if I was in that situation?
Right.
And I think that's really cool when people can put themselves immediately in the story and be like, what would I do? And I think,
or where was I?
Oh yeah, or where you're right. Yeah. Either like what would I do, or like I lived when this happened. Yeah. But I think I would probably behave the same way as my character did in real life. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me it's them like that whole like, like I said before, I was like I wanted to sort of put my mentality in that time and I think, I mean we're in a time where we're seeing, Black men get killed on social media. And it's become such a common thing for us that it's unfortunately like, it's numbing and it's very like
desensitizing.
we're so desensitized to it, and it's just like we almost have to like choose to turn away because we feel like we've seen enough of it. At the time, seeing, you know, that on video was so shocking to the world.
It was.
And it's just like, wow, like I was like, can I still get angry? You know, because I feel we've been so angry for so many years, for the past 5, 6, 7 years. And it's just like, can I still get angry? And that's what I wanted to put that in there. I want to like, let me put myself in that time. And it's almost like putting my own baggage back in time. You know what I mean? It's, you know, it's yeah. That's kind of where,
Everyone felt the tension from what I have been getting.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's great.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you think people felt safe enough to share it?
Share
the
film.
video?
Yeah, the film. When we think a lot about, what are people willing to share on social media, right? Well, you know, when you think about like, okay, I
didn't think about it like that. Yeah,
I make a film and I want people to see it, you know, and I want to have conversations about it, right? I really want to have conversation when I put something out.
Yeah,
and it requires people to interact.
Yeah,
and it requires people to share so that there's an interaction that's like one touch point away.
Yeah.
It's interesting though because it's not you're not sharing something that is like a headline that you just saw yesterday of a shooting. Like it almost gives people more permission to weigh in on it and to feel something about it because it is sort of, you know, reflecting on something that happened in the past or
you know what's interesting about that is that I was just thinking about I was driving around town and I saw ads and billboards for the Netflix series When They See Us.
Yeah.
And I still haven't seen that yet because like I don't want to be angry watching that yet.
Yes.
It took me years to watch Moonlight.
Really?
Or however long. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like
but
I didn't want to watch it.
This
for
one,
some
I was
reason.
just like, so I was thinking back because I saw there was the Paramount Network had released a Trayvon Martin documentary. It was like a 5-parter that I think 5 or 6-parter that Jay-Z produced. And I had to, like, I tried binging it. I couldn't do it. No. I was just literally angry in the entire time. And so when this series came out, I was like, you know, I heard other people's reactions. I was like, I can't watch it yet. I don't want to be that angry. And I think the point I was trying to make though is just that like, I felt like I could share the film that I did. But now I'm thinking, I'm like, were there people who would watch this and feel what I feel right now towards something like When They See Us?
Yeah.
Are they going to watch it and feel that anger again, or even just that frustration?
That's true.
The film, you know, right now it's at 1,000 views.
Yeah.
So it hasn't technically gone viral. I would love to see it go viral to see the reactions from people outside of who I know. So like I would love to see that and see those kind of reactions. You know what I mean?
I was gonna say my aunt, she does not watch films that are she calls them scary, but anything suspenseful or anything.
Yeah.
And so she only watched this because I'm her niece.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then when she watched it, she had like all this stuff to say and brought back all this stuff from her, you know. And so I think that is a possibility maybe for some people.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say the reaction I got across the board was people want more.
Yeah, no, same.
Everyone was like, okay, so
What's the next?
Yeah, what's next? Well, what happens?
It's one of the best reactions you can get for
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, 1,000 views without spending money on advertising, without it being about something that's like present day viral, whatever, without it having, you know, some massive celebrity in it, right? Like without like, it's in you know, we've put out 7 films now, and like we didn't put any advertising into it.
No.
And I know it's silly to say, but I'm proud of 1,000 views.
Yeah.
For sure.
Just
same.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to get people to look at it.
Yeah, there's so much stuff people like are bombarded with every day.
Yeah.
In every way.
Right.
So yeah.
Right.
What I like about it though is that it's not. It's funny. It's almost as if we're talking about it as if it was a documentary about the riots, but like that's not what the scene is. It's about it's about the importance of of family.
Yeah.
It's about
It's this moment in time.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lightness to it. There's a positivity to it that I
Yeah.
think you can pull away from it
Yeah.
without just looking at it and being angry about the situation.
Right.
That
You
too.
can walk away and say like, yes, everything's
Yeah.
fucked up. I'm gonna go over and I'm gonna hug my wife.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My
There
child,
you
you know
go.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So-
Because that's the thing. It's like, when you see documentaries of the riots or you see stories from the riots, there are always stories about people who went looting or people who lost businesses.
Sensational
It's
kind
all
of
this
stuff.
like the
Yeah.
extremes of it. But there was families that didn't step outside. There's families that didn't go riot. There was a whole huge chunk of the city that just stayed indoors.
Yeah.
And like, I know we're talking about reactions, but one of the reactions I got was like from a friend of mine, who she says that her younger sister, who's like a year older than me, but her younger sister, she says that they lived in Hollywood. So that's when, like, I think lived close to some of the main streets. And her sister had night terrors days after for
Damn.
days.
Dang.
And like their dad like closed the windows and they couldn't watch the news. She was like, we could only watch home movies or like videotapes of cartoons that we had. We couldn't. He's like, but my sister had night terrors for days.
Damn.
And I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's insane. It's like, and it's such a stark difference than like what my character, the character in the film had, where he was just like, oh, everything's gonna be fine. I'm just gonna go play soccer out front, and
Yeah.
and the mom is honest with him and told him like, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I think that's
Oh, all right. So now what? I mean, are there plans to expand it into something else? Or?
I've been circling that idea. And it really, I've been thinking about how to kind of do a feature of this, because you can't do it about the entire riots. And I look at it as like, when you see movies that take place during like, World War II, or you see movies that take place during like something significant in history, they're never about the overall thing. They're always about one story or certain characters that are in it. And I'm really, because I'm so ingrained right now with the short film format almost, one of the things I was even thinking is like, there's two ways to go about it. It could either be a series, an anthology series, where every episode
what I'm
is like an individual story during the riots.
Right.
Almost like or even almost like a Band of Brothers type thing, where it's like people giving their stories. Another one was like doing a film almost like in the vein of Babel or like Amores Perros, where it's just like one event and brings like 3 or 4 stories together.
Yeah.
And I that kind of had a little bit more traction in my head. It was like I wanted to do obviously the main couple, which which would be Sandra and Michael, right? That would be that story, kind of a little bit expanded. Another one was what was the other one? It was going to be like a white guy that lives in like a kind of predominantly like Latino and black neighborhood, kind of seeing everything that's happening, and him kind of not giving a shit because he's like in a band and he
got preoccupied with things.
yeah, and he's like, he wants to go out and he's like, I'm gonna go loot and I'm gonna go rob it's kind of inspired by the Sublime song, the character inspired by the Sublime song.
All right.
Another one was gonna be a pair of cousins who just immigrated to the United States from Latin America, and this is their first day in, and they get here and like the riots have broken out, and they're like, what the fuck is going on?
Oh, right.
This is
Didn't we
America?
leave for this?
Yeah.
Right.
Damn, this is America? Oh,
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah. And then I forgot what the fourth story was gonna be.
It's okay. You don't have to give it all away.
No, I'm not. But like it's
Secret
one of those
story.
things. It was one of those things. So like it all kind of meets at a certain point in the
Right.
film because of one event. Their stories all linked together. So that's kind of one of the thoughts I've had. I haven't started writing it. I should, but I'm kind of circling it right now. It's one of those things where like I feel like I should really just get it written.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just start writing it.
Yeah.
Just start writing it.
Yeah.
Something that I keep thinking of, or I thought of earlier, not related to any of that. I'm so sorry to go out to
all
you,
good.
but is Guava
find
Island.
Oh yeah,
Guava Island.
the
seen
Childish
it yet.
Gambino.
I
It
haven't
was.
seen it yet.
It's like a.
Oh,
It's like
yeah.
not an entire film. It's
Yeah.
short. It has narrative
like an
aspects.
hour long.
It has musical aspects.
Yeah.
I really want to watch it
Yeah.
because
Oh, you should watch it.
it
It's
seems like a really
fantastic.
interesting like way to play with the medium.
Yeah.
And I know you guys were talking about like collaborations and that sort of thing.
By the
So
way,
that's what
you know what I
occurred
was
to
thinking
me.
about?
It's a
Right.
half
You
narrative,
dance,
half
you could do some
musical.
dance montages.
Right.
No.
Just
You could
takes
do all the
everything.
things.
It's funny you say that. It's funny you say that. I was
Yeah.
actually thinking, I was like, we should really make like a short musical.
That's
Yes.
Like not
But
in,
not like in the traditional-
not in a
I
music
cannot stand-
not in
yeah.
a music video sense, but like
No.
there's some narrative to the music and the performance, but it's
Right.
like
Yeah.
a musical, and I was like,
Yeah.
Assorted
Music
Kinds.
inspired
Assorted-
narrative, not a
I'm into
musical.
Not
Yeah.
a musical.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Get rid of the
Exactly.
word,
But it's like- but
and
it-
it's something different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's like I don't want it to make it feel like a music video, but it's like
Yeah.
a story
Yeah.
unique
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
this
Totally.
film that we're seeing.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. It
So
should-
you're saying that's what Guava was like?
I
Yeah.
haven't seen it,
You
but
should-
I've
Okay.
read
Yeah, you should-
things
you haven't
about
watched
it,
it
and
yet?
I feel
Oh, you should
that's
watch
what
it. It's
about.
fantastic.
Damn, all right.
They do an interpretation of This Is America that makes it feel fresh,
Ooh.
and I'm like,
That's amazing.
you have two
Yeah, right.
choices. You could watch the
Yeah.
music video, or you could watch the performance in the movie, and they're both amazing.
Wow.
Wow.
All right. That's
Okay,
sold
I'm
me.
Yeah.
sold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sold me.
just off of that, it's amazing.
I'm a fan of Childish.
No, for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, but like when they start, because you don't even notice it's happening until it's happening.
Okay, so
Because
we're
it-
doing this.
Yeah,
so
we're definitely
okay.
doing it. Yeah.
I
We're gonna
just-
do-
Oh, yeah.
We're doing a musical.
I'll
wanted to
shoot
plant
it.
that
I'll shoot it if
seed.
you
Yeah.
want me to, but I'm also down to produce it. Like,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know,
for
whichever
sure.
one.
We'll
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a
It'll be
sound
Assorted
guy
Kinds'
here
first
already, so-
musical.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Good to go.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys
Yeah.
for doing this and for talking about it and unpacking all the things. Do you guys want to add anything else before we wrap it up? Is there anything else you want to make sure the audience is aware of, or?
Catch Sabi on Beats One Radio.
Oh wow! Thanks
on
for the
Pizza.
plug. That's so sweet. Thanks for the plug. I was gonna plug the film. I was like,
Yeah,
go
yeah.
tonight.
You guys can cross
Right.
each other,
For
and
sure.
then nobody
Yeah,
feels
yeah.
like they're plugging.
Exactly.
to
Right.
go to YouTube to watch 9-2.
Yeah. Thank you.
Assorted Kinds.
Yes.
Assorted Kinds on YouTube,
Yes.
assortedkinds.com.
Yes.
David, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at David Gallardo on all social media platforms, or you can go to my website at dgallardo.com. So it's degallardo.com.
And Sabi, where can people find you on the internet?
At Sabi Sounds, and Sounds is spelled Soundz. Yep, that's on everything.
Kevin, what about you?
Oh, I don't know. Just go to Assorted Kinds. I got a short on there.
Yeah.
Go watch Choices on Assorted
watch
Kinds.
Choices, yes.
If you want to buy a T-shirt that says Kevin on it, you can go to
Yes, the Kevin shirt.
kevinshirts.com.
What?
My name is not Kevin, but I want a Kevin
No.
shirt.
You can get your
Next
own
time we do one
Kevin
of these, we
shirt.
should all wear the Kevin shirt
Right.
to it.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And then we'll just talk
To a
about the fact-
podcast where you can't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
We should all wear them
Describe it.
during a production.
Yeah. Yeah, you can find me on Assorted Kinds because that's where I live as well. But
That's right.
also at Chris Laughter, just like haha. On Instagram mostly. I think that's where I have most of my interactions. Or chrislaughter.com if you want to see my work. Thank you guys so much.
Yay!
Yeah,
thanks for
thanks.
having us.
Was
Fantastic.
That was perfect.